I do see the planet as one living organism, like in Gaia theory, of which the oceans and the forests are main organs in the metabolism of water and other nutrients for biological life. And although we celebrate tonight this the republishing of The Living Wisdom of Trees, which is a book that describes 55 tree species, mostly in Europe, but also from other parts of the world, and their traditions and folklore and healing powers, I do like to make the point that this is not about the past. We don't have to glorify the past. The past had its perks in terms of the relationship between man and nature. And there's a lot we can learn from the past, and we have to. And trees are the best teachers I know. And so I'm very aware, talking ancient tree wisdom, that we are living here now in a world that is burning. And it's mostly the forests that are burning. If deforestation and the destruction of forests alone, if that would be a country on the CO2 footprint, it would be the third worst country in the world. So if we talk climate change, or change is not the right word, if we talk climate crisis, climate breakdown, we have to see that the destruction of forests is a major player in that. So, but let us do go back, because when we look at the ancient wisdom and the conception of nature and our place in it, we find a lot of things that can help us today, and that is where mythology and ecology meet. And I have prepared a few, or Watkins has prepared a few sheets here, which I'd like to show you, because it's hard to talk about ancient symbolism without any visuals. So I'm raising this sheet of paper here, which shows engravings and carvings of bone and stone, of rock art, of the Neolithic, that is the later Stone Age, and the Bronze Age, of the tree of life, or the notion of the world tree. It wasn't a religion, because it wasn't an organized religion, but there was a faith or a cosmology, and in all cultures that have revered trees and kept sacred groves for the communication with nature, there's this notion of the world tree, or tree of life, as it's called in the Bible and the Islamic scriptures. And the world tree is the singular symbol that all life is one. And it's not a giant clockwork like in mechanistic worldviews of the last 3 centuries, but it is one organism. Like, back to Gaia theory, the Earth planet as a superorganism in which everything takes part. And so this notion is ancient. It goes back the 6,000 years since writing has been invented, and even in symbolic form well into the Paleolithic. We are talking about 26,000 years. So, and in all these cultures that have preserved some of this ancient knowledge in writing, like the Indian Vedic scripts, or the ancient Persian ones, or the Icelandic sagas, we find 3 main aspects of the world tree. Here's the most ancient one from Sumer. A snake. The snake is always the guardian, also often shown as a dragon or angel. The snake is the spirit and sap of the tree of life. And in this ancient drawing, it shows the sun and the moon. And this is like to say the world tree does not adhere to our dual world of night and day, or good and bad, or left and right, or female or male, sun and moon. The world tree grows in the starlight. In fact, the fruits, the stars are the fruits of this tree in, for example, ancient Sumerian cosmology. And on Earth, every being, every human, every animal, every plant species is a fruit on this tree of life. So there's the unity and the union of the opposites. The second element is the notion of the gate. Everywhere in all cultures, you see here 2 Egyptian images on the left, and a Jewish one on the right top, and we said an ancient Celtic one from the Latin culture. So we have the gate here. In ancient Jewish culture, the menorah, the seven-branched candle holder, turned the tree of life into the tree of light, spiritual light, of guidance, of course. In Egypt, there's the acacia tree guarding the gate to the tomb of Osiris, who represents the rebirth of the soul after death, also of nature. And at the bottom, Anubis, the king of the dead, takes the soul of the departed to the gate into the underworld or to the afterlife. But the path leads through the tree. This is symbolism. The tree really is the gate. And under the acacia, the transformation of Osiris happened. So you also see here, by the way, that cultures that you would have never associated with tree mythology, like Egypt, isn't that a desert country, have a high veneration of trees. And the third aspect is that the spirit of the tree of life, the world tree, the world of the soul, anima mundi, the soul of the world, I mean, it's always been female. And that's where all the goddesses cults from the Bronze Age and Iron Age stem from. This is the goddess in the thorn bush, which derivated down through mythology in Europe, for example, to the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty. But it was originally the thorn bush, no castle. But the spirit, or the fairy or the goddess, nature spirit in the thorn bush. In the ancient symbols and petroglyphs of the world tree, there is two patterns that took shape from this. One is the branch pattern, which most famously peaked in the menorah, the Jewish candle holder I just mentioned, the seven-branched tree. The other one is like a cross of 3 lines, and that is the world tree with 3 branches to the sky and 3 roots to the underworld. And that is the shamanic world tree, also in Siberian shamanism, for example, where the shaman in trance would climb to the spirit world or down the roots to the underworld. And this 6-folded star can then be found in sacred symbols, talismans, and so on, yes, from left to right. Ancient Greek, ancient Jewish, Islamic, and ancient Germanic votive offerings and sacred objects. And these 3 lines took the shape of this flower-like shape when the Sumerians invented the compass and actually could draw proper circles. So, but there's also a leaf shape hidden in this lore of that singular world tree branches out into the many trees that they all have certain aspects of it. For example, a tree, the birch tree, that white, graceful, slender birch tree, has been known in many cultures across Europe as the tree of the beginning. So it is in Celtic Ireland and right across to Russia, the lady of the woods. And in shamanic Siberia, it is the world tree because there's not much else growing in those dry meadows or lands. And the birch has always everywhere been seen as very protective force. For example, the ancient Germans carved runes from it. The Berkana rune means motherhood, protection. They carved cradles for children or talismans for babies to protect, particularly the small ones. And as you know, all children love the birch. So there's a tree, a real mother tree, if you like. A sim also slightly related to that with its white blossoms is the May tree or hawthorn, which in ancient Celtic times has been a herald of true summer beginning, of the warm half of the year. The Welsh goddess Olwen, her name translates as she of the white trace or something like that. And there's the notion back to the stars because she was said, so in the mythology she's the one leaving this trail of petals behind her, white hawthorn petals. But as she walks the sky, she leaves, these petals are actually the Milky Way. So there's a notion back from like regional mythology to that ancient ideas of the trees connecting us with the cosmos and keeping us in tune with nature. And then there's one tree I would particularly like to point out, because in all my years of study I found no other tree that has more spiritual meaning and also more folklore and deeper mythology and altogether richer cultural treasure than the yew tree. That's that conifer that is native to the UK, in fact with the juniper the only native conifer, which has those red berries. Anyone not knowing the yew tree, please hands up. Aha, well then you will after this evening. It's only one person. Okay. And it's got these neatly parted, it's got green needles, very dark, and red berries, except botanically they are not berries, but it doesn't matter tonight. These fruits, and they're eaten by birds and many other animals, so they have a strong ecological impact on the ecosystem. Yew trees have mostly survived in churchyards, I mean ancient yew trees, and that's where they're very known for, the so-called churchyard yew. And there's a lot of discussion in this country since the Victorian times of how old these trees might be, because yew trees do grow about at least only half as fast as any other tree species in the UK. And when you see really, really big churchyard yews, then you think they are very old. They go back well beyond the Middle Ages. So that has been very awe-inspiring, but there's so much more to be found. In fact, I know societies across Europe of foresters and botanists who started specializing in yew because it's so intriguing that as a conifer, for example, it is not a conifer. Conifer means cone-bearing, but they have fleshy fruits. Conifers usually have resin. The yew tree doesn't have resin. It's a very archaic tree that has developed in the Jurassic times along the late dinosaurs, and in fact is the oldest tree species of Europe. Similar only with the ginkgo in Asia and the redwoods in North America. And a particular botanical ability of yew trees, one of many, but I have to cut myself short tonight, so cut to the chase and tell you the most exciting, amazing thing is that as they grow old and hollow out, they create interior growth, interior roots or shoots, which look a bit like branches inside the hollow trunk. And so here we see two hollow yew trees, one in Sardinia, one in Turkey, that have this interior growth. And as it develops from the cambium on the top of the trunk, it creates new transport channels of xylem and phloem. So it starts to support the crown in the living kind of way. And that means that interior growth can more and more take over the life of the crown. So eventually you get trees like this, where the whole outer shell is falling apart. And it has been for too many decades. Trees like this have been called a wreck, and they need to be removed because they look untidy and all this kind of thing. So the point is that there's actually a new life dawning in these trees. In this case, there is no interior growth, but the new growth happens around the places where it just starts rounding off again with secondary growth. So these shell-like fragments will eventually, over centuries, be kind of round or oval-shaped trunks again. And if you look at them then, you will say, oh, 3 trees growing close together, when it originally was one tree with a huge circumference. So that means you never know with the yew tree how old it really is, unless you have a known planting date of one plant. It could just be the second life of an ancient tree. I also prepared this one, which is a graph of the process where a tree develops, as others do, and then the hollowing begins, and then the interior growth sets in and grows while the old tree is falling apart and breaking away, and eventually you have new growth, and but a very ancient root under the earth. But because there was not much understanding of these ability to revitalize themselves in the UK, but the UK is still a country with most oldest trees, because these yew trees are the most ancient trees in Europe. And if you see, this is a graph showing the proportions. All these colors here at the top are what's there in all of Europe. The purple one is France, which has the most yew trees on the continent. But the green bit is Wales, and the blue bit is England. So that's why when my first yew book came out, we called the UK the Noah's Ark for yew trees. But there was no legal protection, and still isn't, because the normal TPO, tree preservation order, doesn't work, because the trees have to be intact to get one. If they look like falling apart, then they don't get any understanding, these individual trees. Hence we formed the Ancient Yew Group in 2004, and if you go to our website, Ancient Yew with a hyphen, ancient-yew.org, you will have access to our full database of a few thousand yew sites now across the UK and some on the continent. So you could look up near your home, or next time you go traveling, if there's any ancient yew along your way, and have a real awe-inspiring experience. Here's just two examples out of many of how the yew trees come also into ancient symbology. Here's the typical branch shape again of ancient. This is a Celtic altar stone from the Pyrenees. This one is from Greek, from the Temple of Healing, sacred branch motif. Here's again that six-pointed star and various guises from, again, the whole Near East and across Europe. And the two bottom ones are Celtic medallions and brooches. This one here is just celebrating the red yew arrows, for example. Of course, this is an interpretation. It could just be red dots with a black center, yes, of course. But once you know what role the yew tree played in Celtic and Irish, Welsh mythology, then you have your doubts. So at least it needs to be mentioned. You make of it what you may. And coming back to that theme that the world tree is female because it gives birth, after all. Here's a table that shows from the 3rd and the 5th and the 6th millennium BC, again across from various places in Europe, connections of yew tree adorning the female reproductive parts or the womb. Particularly beautiful is this one here, which is from the Greek Cyclades, which is a ritual object. The archaeologists called it a pan or something, like a frying pan, but it's absolutely not. And it shows the vulva adorned with 2 yew twigs, and the womb filled with birth water, and a ship and a bird, which is translated as the soul, a new soul arriving in a new body, the boat, going through the waters of life and growing in the womb. So we have distinct, clear symbology that connects the yew with the ancient mother goddesses of Europe, like in Greece or ancient Egypt. And these goddesses were later defamed as goddesses of death, like Hecate, the famous Greek goddess of the underworld, which originally was a patron of midwives in Egypt. And the Germanic Hel is similar. After her, the Christians named Hell, Hell. Except I believe Hell was an invention for marketing reasons. So, but there was an underworld, and the yew tree is the dark, somber tree that may lead you to the underworld. Not everyone likes them, that's okay. But it's certainly a very powerful tree. Something beautiful about the connection with trees and humans is that even in the Bible, you find that the trees have been revered and honored for coming to Earth before us. That is, I think in Ezekiel, after the fall from paradise, it says the trees of Eden, of paradise, the trees of Eden went down to Sheol before you or with you. That means, which exactly resembles natural history. Before humans could go to Earth and incarnate in physical bodies, the planet had to be prepared by the whole process of ecology and natural history. So when plants first had plants developed, once they were tall and big, like in the carbon age, they could change over millions of years the atmosphere to the point that the oxygen, which was a trace element before, it could actually reach, say, 9%. Only that's the kind of threshold where bigger mammals can actually even evolve. You can't get bigger than mice under 9% breathing, not with the kind of burning apparatus that we have in our metabolism. And then it overshoots into dinosaur time, everything goes oversized, and settled finally at 21, 22% oxygen count that we have today, and we can all breathe and birds can fly because of that. But that oxygen is coming from plants. And you know something else very beautiful is, if you think the atmosphere, the air we breathe and up to the blue sky, 99% of the air is made by living things. There's the oxygen from the plants, and 3/4 of it is nitrogen, which comes from bacteria. And these elements would too quickly settle and become too stable and not moving anymore in a chemical sense if they weren't continuously replaced by living organisms. So when now, ecologically, we bring out the big disaster by messing with the planetary cycles of water and these compounds like carbon, like nitrogen, like oxygen, we upset the balance and we don't know what we're doing. We're like blindfold and mad. So it's high time that we come back to some understanding, some deeper understanding. And as I said in the beginning, trees are very good teachers to go silent, to go within. And I would say every spiritual practice helps the planet, because you get away. There was a Guardian article in last summer. I forgot the author, unfortunately, but she said that the whole problem with the destruction of the environment is to do with white supremacy, and that again roots in that understanding that the world is for the taking, because it's a divisional thinking, a dualism, that is us and the world, and we can just eat it all up. And that is opposed to basically, like, we're living in a very mythological time right now, where this force, this mindset that destroys and eats up life is balanced, fragilely balanced, by those people who know that we are all one, that life is together, and we have to honor not just the human race, but the whales and the plants and every living thing. It's their home too. This planet is their home too, and we've got to allow them and not destroy their home as well. So it's these two different mindsets. So and I'm also happy always when I see, for example, Buddhist monks nowadays in various countries in Asia who start environmental projects. And so it's like everyone getting involved, but we really need the two sides now. Like, we need to do our practice at home, if you like, or in groups, but we also need to make our voice heard and change politics and economy by not believing anymore the stories they have been telling us. Trees do not grow from soil or earth, but from the air. Trees, the air, they only need the soil, of course, to have a firm standing, and to get some nutrients, some minerals, micronutrients for the cells to do their biochemical work. But the actual material trees grow from, the wood and the hard bits of the leaves, is carbon. Plants are carbon structures, and the carbon comes from the air. So that's why they take carbon out and change world climate. So it has been said now, so I just want to mix my answer with the situation that we have about the climate crisis. It has been said, yeah, then it's all right then. We increase the carbon, what's the problem? The forest can grow faster and so on. But that's very short-sighted. For the global point, the carbon rates grow and trees, there have been some tests with pine trees, for example, that they did grow faster for a year or two with higher carbon rates in the air. But this is all done upset to nil again, because nowadays everywhere we have droughts and less water. So the carbon may rise, but the trees actually fight more than ever because they don't have enough water. And on the single level, it's like we have trees in the cities and they improve the air and they might be growing fast because they have carbon too. But city trees normally don't go older than 40 years and they struggle with disease and illness half their life. Why are there so many yew trees in Britain but not across Europe? And the ironic answer is because the British destroyed them. But that's not quite true. The stupid continent people destroyed them by selling them to the British, because Edward I in the late 1300s and for the next 300 years discovered that yew longbows were the perfect weapon of mass destruction to mow down Scottish and French armies. So in my eyes the British Empire was built on the yew longbow, but they needed thousands and thousands of it. In any given decade in these 300 years, the British Army would have about 22,000 bowyers, professional people continuously practicing. So every 2 years they needed a new bow. They had a second one for the battles. In the famous battles of Crécy and Agincourt and so on with the French, there were 5,000 to 7,000 archers in the English army who would release, because the longbow was very powerful. Yew wood is the hardest yet most flexible wood. It creates, opened a totally different chapter to archery. And they made them longer as well. The bow weight was something like up to 80 kilograms. They found skeletons of professional archers who had different bones because of the immense muscles they needed. I tried, I couldn't even move the string on a rebuild, right? So these, and they shoot with a velocity, I think up to 300 meters, they could still hit. And they would go through the armor of a rider, through the leg, through the saddle, into the horse, things like that. They could go 2 inches into an oak door of a castle or something, if fired from a closer range, of course. So they were an immense weapon, and there was a big yew trade evolving. That was like early capitalism. The Bavarian, the Alpine kingdoms, particularly Bavaria and Austria, sold more and more of their yew wood to the UK. There were shiploads coming into the London harbour. There was a whole bowyer quarter making bows. So that explains the difference. And next question. We have got only 2 more questions left.
Yeah, beyond the use of the yew as mass destruction, why would you say that it was venerated so much by the ancients? Because I mean, it's a very poisonous tree.
Thank you. That's oh God, good. Yes, I should have mentioned that. Exactly. So I did. I mean, I did mention it from the botanical viewpoint. The tree grows hollow where other trees die. It starts this new life by creating new growth inside. So that's like a self-renewal from the inside out. And while other trees normally have, it's said, have 3 life stages: basically growth, maturity, and then decay. The yew tree goes beyond that and has 7 life stages, like I showed in my graph. So now imagine an ancient culture that doesn't do botany, they don't have this rational thinking, and they see the tree as a being that renews itself inside out, like nature does. So there's obviously the straight connotation that this is very clear, very pure force of nature that shows us the power of nature for self-renewal. And even the Christians didn't have a problem with that and just slightly renamed it the Tree of Resurrection. And if I had my slideshow with me today, I would show you a beautiful picture of a French yew tree that is very ancient, very hollow, with a whole shrine to Mary the Virgin inside. Because the Christian Mary the Virgin, as well as the Magdalene, took over many cults across the continent which were formerly dedicated to Venus or Hecate and all these Bronze Age or Iron Age goddesses. But my personal journey to think, hey, there's much more to trees than just botany, began with hearing about the ancient Irish tree alphabet, the Ogham, which is like a set of runes which could be used as an alphabet, and they have all tree names. They also have bird names and other things, but obviously that was very intriguing. And so that coincides with the native trees to ancient Ireland 2,000 years ago. Back in the 80s, for example, I did tree calendars. I wanted to talk about folklore and the wisdom of trees back then. And then what I then added was some European trees like beech or poplar, which just didn't grow in Ireland at the time. So I thought we have to update that circle of sacred trees if we want to keep it regional or local. And then in terms of writing an international book, if you like, the publisher asked me back then, we need something that is also interesting for America and Australia. So I thought, I put some in, although not many. For example, for Australia, it's only the eucalyptus. Because my work mainly I did, as you gathered, I reviewed our own history, our being European ancient history, because this is the cultural circle that brought so much destruction to the rest of the world. There's, of course, much more tree lore in native cultures, indigenous cultures in South America and Africa, among the Aborigines and so on. But this is known, and they can hopefully speak for themselves, and I hope they can be heard again. What my contribution was to the whole discourse, that in our own culture that has been using and abusing nature so badly, it was all there as well. And even ancient Jewish, like the biblical stories, it's full of sacred trees and even tree oracles and everything. And when the Christian anthropologists in the 1900s discovered that, they were still very Christian. They were like, oh my God, you know.
Oh God.
They were really shocked to see how so much pagan law in what they thought was pure Jewish and therefore the roots of Christianity.